obviously HBO Max doesn't really have the problem of people of alerting people they exist. People know HBO exists. It's one of the most recognizable brands in the world. But John, let's turn to you and talk about how consumers find OTT services. As I said, on Roku alone, there's 14,000. Do you think we're entering the era of super aggregators, or at least services that will help us find the content that we have either subscribed to or that is available to us on various services? How do you see search, discovery, and recommendation happening now, different perhaps than what it was 6 months ago?
Yeah, I think that the need for aggregation among consumers is growing. And because now the average, we talked about the average person using almost 5 different providers. And that, because that's the average across everyone, that means that there are lots of people using that many who aren't necessarily sort of early adopters of technology in general, or really comfortable with, using lots of different inputs or lots of different menus. And so one of the things when we ask people, what makes you choose one provider over another, one of the things that has the biggest impact is simplicity. So simplicity in finding new shows, simplicity in finding the next thing to watch when I'm done. And I do think that aggregators like Amazon, like Roku, but even like traditional cable companies have that ability to take content from lots of different sources and put it in one place where people can find it. We find that consumers who, for example, have integrated Netflix or Hulu with their cable TV on-demand menus, people who do that even once then tend to log into Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is through their set-top box most often thereafter. And they're also more likely to be satisfied with their cable service and less likely, they say, to cut the cord in the future. So there really is the ability for platforms that can offer that aggregation to make the whole TV experience a lot easier to manage for people. Consumers are really excited about all the options that they have, but it's created a first world problem for many of trying to get the most out of all of them in a succinct way.
John, can I ask you a question about that though? Do you think those aggregators, when they do that, they're trusted? Because I know, like, when I see this and I see all these things aggregated, I don't always feel that they're actually giving me a good recommendation engine versus promoting something they want me to watch over top of the other things they're aggregating.
Yeah,
I think that's the bigger challenge is who is your trusted curation, and I would rather trust a really good reviewer on a newspaper perhaps than a recommendation engine sometimes.
Yeah, people don't put a lot of trust in recommendation engines. Recommendations are one of the biggest ways. Word of mouth is the biggest way that people say they find out about new shows. But it makes a huge difference if that word of mouth comes from someone that they know versus something that could be perceived as an ad or actually is an ad. And you're right, the people are pretty jaded about that. We've seen, Netflix originals, when we first started tracking the stuff, like back when, Lilyhammer that mostly people didn't remember, but when House of Cards was sort of the first big one that really drew people's attention and there weren't that many Netflix originals, then recommending a Netflix original really had a big impact on people. And people still think that Netflix is one of the best sources for original programming, but now that there's a whole row of Netflix originals when you log in, the idea that somehow this is being recommended, especially for me, because there's been some thought put into it, is fading, and people are noticing that they get served Netflix originals first, regardless of whether those might fall into their very specific niche preference for the kinds of shows they like.